What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Titletown South Florida, the Miami Herald's high school sports show. I'm Andre Fernandez, Deputy Sports Editor, back to recap the second week of the high school football season and look ahead to the third with my co-host, David Wilson. Back into the action, David, a little bit, another big game, another big week. But this time, unfortunately, our South Florida powerhouse just came up a little bit short, and that was the Central Rockets. We're going to cover a little bit about that. A classic, though, in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, not a lot of people got to see it because, first off, I'm shocked that game wasn't on ESPN or ESPNU or anything like that. And then with the weather out there looking the same as Miami most of the time early on this season, I don't think the game got started until almost midnight Eastern time. So I hope whoever stayed up at least got to enjoy a great one.
Yeah, I was at the Miami game for the Herald on Friday night, and as I was kind of leaving there, I was like, oh, this game's just starting. I was kind of planning to come home and put it on while I went to bed, but unfortunately not on TV anywhere. And as you said, we all kind of missed out on a classic because of it. Central comes up short, but I think hard to say a statement when you lose, but we talked a lot about how much turnover the Central team had from last season and the fact they went out to Gorman, had that really long delay, a team that destroyed Chaminade last year, obviously a different team for them, Gorman this year than they were last year. But to hang with them on the road, Central, they haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I think I still had a little bit of faith that if they could maybe pull it off. We know they have some questions to answer this year, but it's still Central. They've got the experience of doing this before. That staff has been through, at this point, pretty much anything you can think of as far as a coaching staff is concerned. But we'll get into that. We'll get a little more into the Rockets and some of the other big games this week as we go forward into this show. Remember, if you're watching this, you can watch it not only at MiamiHerald.com, but on YouTube. And if you can only listen to it, it's available on Spotify, iTunes, every podcatcher you can think of at this point, pretty much. But let's go right in and talk a little bit about another game that happened this week. Well, unfortunately, some bad weather wreaked havoc with a lot of the better games that we were hoping to cover. So we don't have a lot of highlights like we normally do, but we do have a few good ones. And one of them happened at Cardinal Gibbons High School. That's where Chaminade had, the second of all of these many tests that they're going to face early in the season. A rare meeting between Chaminade and Gibbons in the regular season. Last year it was in the preseason. But let's start with them. The game started a little weird. I don't think in all my years of covering high school football, I ever saw a 4-0 score at the end of the first quarter. But that's exactly what happened after two safeties. Right? It kind of looked like exactly. But the Chiefs, it was the Chiefs defense and special teams. I mean, one was a mistake. Ball went over the punter's head, went out of the end zone. But another time they stuffed them in the end zone, got the 4-0 lead. Let's take a look at one of those plays. Christopher Williams, a talented defensive end for Gibbons, had the sack here of Cedric Bailey. Yeah! But pretty much after that second quarter started, Bailey and the boys got everything rolling. And here's the first one, his first connection to Kyle Washington, throws a dime right here. Now, that play got retweeted by a lot of NC State fans who are excited about Cedric Bailey, commit to the Wolfpack. But nothing got quite as retweeted as this play that we're about to show you. The play of the game, heck, maybe even the play of the year, done by recent UM commit Zaquan Patterson. I don't really know what the ruling was. Was it an interception, a fumble? I'm just going to call it a rip away. I mean, look at this play. I mean, I almost felt bad for that Gibbons receiver. It's also just got basically abused on that play. And then after that, Chaminade was definitely at that point off to the races. And then Bailey hits another great pass here to Ja'Cory Lewis, who shows you his speed right before halftime. Really, David, though, the unit that has been pressed a lot, as we talked about before, is their defense. And here's a sack late in the game by Chaminade to kind of, they had already pretty much put the game away, but they got, how it is sometimes. You get up big and the defense just swarms. Here's an example. That was Kendarius Frazier on the sack on that play, but plenty to go around on that defense. But Patterson, one of 3 pick sixes this team has had in just 2 games. So here's what Zaquan Patterson had to say after the game.
Zaquan, you wrestled that ball away and then took it to the house. So just talk about the play. What did you see on that play when you took it away?
The ref just told me that what they coaches said on the sideline, he can't guard you. So I knew they were going to try to come at me eventually. I told him to throw it. If you look back at the film, you're going to see me say throw it. I was pointing at the sideline, throw the ball. And as soon as I seen the ball go up, he ain't want it for real. So I just took it. And then after that, it was just touchdown. After that, I ain't trying to go down. I'm trying to score. So.
Just the play of the defense the first 2 weeks have been really, really good. I mean, what's been the key to that? Just the success?
Trying to prove the point that we ain't relying on our offense this year. We want to make that statement that we're going to come out and play. We don't have to wait on our offense to score all these points for us to come out and play, Last year, we relied on our offense a lot as a defense, and this year we want to make a point, especially with as much seniors as we got 25 seniors on this team. We want to make a point that we ain't going to wait for nobody. We all going to come out and play once the whistle blows.
I feel like sometimes the defense maybe gets a little overlooked because they have so many weapons on offense.
Absolutely. When you got so many guys on offense, so many 5-stars, great players, not even stars. We just got so many athletes on our offense that defense is going to get overlooked for sure. But nonetheless, these guys still go against each other in practice every day, so iron sharpens iron. I feel like these kids, a lot of these kids is being overlooked for what they're doing with us right now. But I feel like they're gonna get their look eventually, especially playing on the schedule we playing this year or the national games we got this year. They definitely gonna get their look.
After the UM commitment last week, how was this week like for you?
Yep. So,
it was good. How was the week?
It was a great week. Love talking to Coach Adai, love talking to Cristobal. They're great coaches. Part of the reason why I chose to stay home. Just building with my team, enjoying what we have. This is my senior year, so I gotta enjoy this as much as I can. But no, definitely it was a great week from the defense and practice, and we bringing it to the field.
Yeah, so Zaquan, talked a little bit about that, and this past week, an exciting week for him after committing to Miami. But David, this unit showed its depth. JoJo Trader, by the way, got an update on him. They think he's going to be able to come back by the Central game. I mean, that's his game, with his former team and his current team. So he's really trying hard. Sounds like it's just a sprain. He'll be okay. As a precaution, they're keeping him out. And maybe he'll play against Heritage, not this week against Bergen Catholic, but maybe against Heritage. But for sure, they're thinking by the Central game, he should be all right. But, Chaminade, very impressive as usual. Huh?
Yeah, I don't worry about their offense at all, right? When you got, obviously, Jeremiah Smith and a quarterback like Cedric Bailey, and then like a guy like Kyle Washington, who is like, on how many teams would be the number 1 wide receiver in the on the roster. Like they've got young guys,
more than half the county.
Yeah, they're young guys who would will one day be in the Trader Smith spot. You mentioned though the defense. That was the question mark, right? Because there's no Kenyatta Jackson on that team, right? There's not a 5-star defensive end, and I think kind of across South Florida, there's not that elite level recruit, at least up front. But Chaminade every year has a couple of defensive linemen who are Division I prospects. They've always got good linebackers, maybe sometimes undersized guys who don't even go D1 that end up being, that are just really productive players or end up walking on maybe somewhere. And then Zaquan Patterson is kind of the ultimate Swiss Army knife, right? A guy who can play corner, plays a lot of corner for them. That play looked like it's that corner, that pick six or whatever we're going to call that. Can come in the box and thump. Obviously, we know about his special teams prowess. He gives them a lot of flexibility to, in the same way that a guy like I think of what like James Williams did for American Heritage. They're obviously very different, but the way that if it was a pass-heavy team, you played him deep and he could wreak havoc as a ball hawk, or a team that's going to run it a lot, stick him right in the box. He's basically a linebacker for you too.
Yeah, and it's just, to me, it makes this game even more interesting because I feel like we kind of had Central on this like slightly bigger pedestal than everybody else, but now I'm not. We'll see. I mean, this team, going back to that Rockets game, we saw how it happened. They were back and forth. They fall behind early, a couple scores, and to their credit, I think one kid that really impressed me with the Rockets was Jaden Ford, and we knew he was good, but that kickoff return that put them back in the game, and then the quarterback play. It's interesting how almost by design they're rotating these guys. We didn't see much of Beckham Kritzef at all, but J.C. Evans played a little bit, Smith played a little bit. Both guys made some plays, a few mistakes here and there, and really at the end had them in the fight toward the end. The one that was a little bit unfortunate was them going for that long field goal, which could have put them ahead by 5. I almost wonder, maybe does Jube look at that now and think, should we have done that with the bad weather, with the slippery field, or do you trust your kicker no matter what? Or would they have maybe rolled the dice, try to put them away, get the first down, and maybe they would have been able to run the clock? I mean, always easy to second guess after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, they always trust their special teams, right? They had a great, it's a new kicker this year. But yeah, I mean, those are the margins you play with. And like I said, they're so much turnover. They're learning about themselves. I'm sure still too. So they'll get better as the year goes on because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I mean, like I said, the matchup now that Chaminade's defense is looking so well against them and that offense, that's going to be a really telling one, because it's going to test these quarterbacks, and it's really going to, especially Chaminade's secondary is loaded. They could pass rush this year, which maybe they could last year, but they have guys that can do it too, that have stepped up. So,
yeah, I'm not sure if you've done your rankings yet this week, but like Chaminade has done everything in their power to like earn kind of number 1 right now. Obviously, it's like a toss up. Yeah, it's a toss up. Obviously, that game is going to be like a pick 'em basically. But when they beat St. Francis and then blow out a Cardinal Gibbons team that I think both of us are really high on, like a flawless start to their season, obviously.
Yeah, no, I did flip them, and Chaminade's number 1 now, but you can't penalize Central too much after that. So they kept them 1 and 2. I kind of on purpose, because I want them to
and they'll play each other. They'll be 1 and 2 when they play, barring something surprising, and whoever wins that will be in pole position for the rest of the year.
Right, and both teams have tough tests, which we will get to later on when we talk about our Week 3 picks. But let's switch gears now to the Soul Bowl, which was rained out on Thursday night, but they were able to play it on Saturday, and Jackson kind of regrets that because 63-0 Northwestern put it on them. And this was ugly from the get-go, and a game that Northwestern we know is a little younger this year and still comes up with the biggest route in terms of margin of victory in Soul Bowl history. And that's saying something, because this rivalry goes back a long ways to, the 60s, I believe. But hey, good for the Bulls. I mean, they fought Vero Beach pretty tough. Now they get this team. Now this weekend, they get a good Venice team at home. Let's hear from Michael Lee Harris about what he had to say about the Bulls and how they're doing so far.
Here with Coach Michael Lee Harris after Northwestern's 63-0 victory over Jackson. Coach, what were some of the keys to victory tonight?
Just making sure that we stay locked in and build on the mistakes that we made the previous week. That was more of the emphasis, is to get better week to week. What we made mistakes on last week, the goal was to come out here and not make the same mistakes. So that was more so of the emphasis on tonight's game.
You guys certainly improved from last week. You got your first win as a head coach. How special is that, formerly playing here at Northwestern way back when?
It meant a lot. This is a traditional game, the Soul Bowl. So to get my first win as a head coach and it being the Soul Bowl victory, it means a lot. And this is the part of the game that sometimes we can forget about. Always trying to worry about wins and losses. We forget about the cherish and count our blessings on things like this, making sure that we soak up this kind of atmosphere. So, it's special being able to play in this type of game and come back as the head coach and win this type of game.
How have you seen this rivalry kind of evolve, I guess, in your years? Because Northwestern's kind of dominated this the past 19 or 20 meetings.
Yeah, so fortunately for Miami Northwestern, we have dominated this rivalry. As an alumnus myself, it's something that you happy to see. It's still a Soul Bowl. So even though we've dominated the win column in it, it's still something that you get up for, something that you look forward to, and it means more than just us dominating it. Like, it goes back to the tradition of Miami Northwestern and Miami Jackson. Back when people of color was only allowed to go to certain schools, and that's where it began. Like, having soul and those schools having really good talent, really good players, and being able to match up against one another. So even though people may say it has swayed towards Miami Northwestern, is the tradition and it's the principality of where it come from, and that's something that we don't want to forget. Like, as we get further and further away from our history and from our roots, we want to make sure we keep things alive for the next generations and they understand where it came from.
Perfect. Awesome. Appreciate it, Coach. Congrats.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that it's really declined the way it has in terms of competition.
Yeah.
And really, I don't know if this started. I know I was gone for a little bit. I think this started either last year or the year before, them doing it in week 2.
Yeah, they moved it earlier. I think it used to maybe be in that slot that now is the GMAC championship. I wonder if that has something to do with it. But yeah, it moved it up in the calendar a few years ago.
It used to be. It used to be on the final week when. Yeah, it used to be on the final week, like the non-district week when everything's wrapped up already, which now kind of has a little more of a bearing on the playoffs. But I mean, I don't know. It always felt like the great end of the regular season game, and obviously when Jackson was more competitive. I mean, that really, if Jackson could somehow get back to even a semblance of being the way they used to be, maybe it'll help the rivalry, I guess. But it's a shame because there were some classic games. I remember it's obviously never going to be 50,000 in the Orange Bowl, but you did still have, even when it was at Traz, you had some fervor for it. 8,000 people would show up. Now it's just, 2,000 on a Saturday night. It's just lost its luster. It's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, the Central rivalry has obviously replaced it. I think for a younger generation, probably. I mean, you grew up in Miami and all that kind of stuff. You probably remember a little bit more or have seen the way that those rivalries have shifted. As long as I've been here, it's been all Northwestern. Johnny Lee Harris I thought very poignant about what that, he's an alumnus as he said there, what that rivalry means, the history of it, and for him to get his first win there, it's meaningful still to the guys who have kind of been part of that and grown up in the football community down here, especially the ones who really are
right.
And I think that's history and all that stuff too.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to highlight the game still, and that's why I still wanted to do that. From the Herald standpoint, still want to actually cover this game year in and year out. But let's talk a little bit about another. We're going to introduce our guest for the week this week. A big game this coming week between Goleman and American. And if you haven't been paying attention these last few weeks out there, yes, I said Goleman and American. It's been a long time since we've had these two teams in a quote-unquote big game setting. So we decided to invite Goleman coach Ariel Cabrero to the show this week.
Hey,
Ariel,
how you doing, guys?
How you doing, Coach? We wanted to bring you on because I don't know if you heard that part just now. We were saying Goleman and American in a big game, and it's been a while. It's been a while since those two schools have really played a game of this this magnitude and with a little bit on the line early in the season. But Coach, we talked to you in media day. We wanted to first off just thanks for being on the show, of course, and
happy to be here.
Just tell us a little bit about just how I guess the feeling of, I guess you could say, validation of seeing the process, seeing the buildup to get your team to the point it is right now. How good has that made you feel to see the kids buy in and everything to get to this?
Sure. I mean, listen, it's been many years, of build up, and we had a lot of good years in the independent league. We were in that league for 3 years, and we made it to the championship game 3 times, and we won 2 of those titles. And we faced American in the independent league, and we actually beat them 2 years ago by 40. Last year we lost by a point, so this is kind of the tiebreaker game, so our kids are pumped up. I know their kids are pumped up. It's a good rivalry that's come back that I think is going to definitely be a lot more even than it's been in the past. So, I mean, just the satisfaction of seeing the program grow, seeing all these things come to fruition, right? Doing it the right way. Building it through our weight room, building it through our own kids, right? Every kid that's going to play for us actually attends Goleman. So that's the most satisfying of it all.
You mentioned building it up, starting in the independent league. I wanted to ask you about that because obviously, that league flies under the radar a little bit, but I think we've seen it with a couple of teams where, you can kind of have success there, I guess maybe build confidence in the program, build excitement around the program, and use that as a springboard to come back into a district. Can you just tell us about what that process was like, winning in that league, building things up kind of there to get back to the point where you guys are now?
Absolutely. So, I mean, to me, there was no shame in it. At the time we went in, we played all the teams that were our contemporaries, you know, the Hialeah Gardens of the world, Reagan, Coral Park, Varela. You know, Goleman was in the same category of all those schools. And they got some really good programs, you know, that maybe don't have the talent. So for us going in there, it was kind of just a way to prove to the community, to kids, to parents, hey, look, this staff at Goleman can coach. The program can succeed. We can put kids in college, right? We were able to put our first Division I kid in school 2 years ago, Vari Marshall, who's the first Division I player from Goleman in like 20 years, right? So, and he came out of the independent league. So for us, it was just a way to prove, hey, look, our scheme, our way, our process is successful. And we were successful against our peers, right? Even teams, look, Dr. Crop was in that league. They came out, they won 2 district championships. They've been in the playoffs, right? We beat them in 2020 in the championship game of the independent league. So, you know, it's a proven thing. You know, I wish more teams would actually be open to it, to understand, hey, sometimes it takes you a couple of years to just build that confidence, build that kind of reputation, you know, instead of going out there and being overmatched week after week after week.
Yeah, I think one other team we saw a little bit of that. They didn't end up making the jump yet. Maybe they will eventually, but we saw that success. Coral Reef won the league, I think, or one of them last year. They've been building up. I know they got hit a little hard by graduation too, but it's another example of you can have success there and build it. Tell us about some of those guys on the roster. I know Darryl Bell is one of the headliners for sure. Kid with a lot of D1 offers. I think FSU being one of them. Now media day, we hadn't seen them play yet. How those guys looked so far. I mean, you've had some pretty convincing victories so far in the early going. Just how those guys clicked and how are you seeing them on the field?
I mean, the guys we took to media day, I mean, those are just captains of the team, man. I mean, those are the rock of what we do. You know, RJ Alphon's been doing great as a defensive end and as a tight end. Anthony Rodriguez and Dylan Salid, both of those guys are inside backers. Those are the heart of the defense, you know, in the run game and in the pass game. You know, they've been doing a phenomenal job. We have on the roster as well 2 senior quarterbacks, one being Daniel Riveron and the other one is Eric Mejia. Both of those kids are playing for us, and both of them are playing lights-out football. The offensive line has been doing a phenomenal job. We have a senior offensive lineman, Hansel DeBeche, who actually missed all of last season due to injury, and he's off the charts. Had a phenomenal first couple of games. He's the undisputed leader of that offensive line. I mean, listen, I could keep rolling off some of these names. We have a senior, Robbie Henry. He's a DB and a wide receiver, and he's been playing lights out too. You know, I can keep going down the line with these guys, but it's just these first few weeks we've really come out there and really done our jobs. This Friday will be a big test, right? So this Friday we're going to find out, you know, who's really going to show up to play, who's really going to stand out of the pack.
Having a D1 kid like that, there's a lot of ways you can prove yourself as a coaching staff, right? You can win games. You can, you know, be like a good mentor and all that kind of stuff. What is having a player like that, both to show where guys can get to, and I'm sure also a guy like that just naturally becomes an important leader for you guys. What does having a guy like that come through your program do for you guys?
Well, I think it legitimizes you in certain ways. I mean, and it's not just football. You know, our school has a very good reputation for being an academic school. We're a magnet program. We attract really good academic kids to our school, Avari being one of them. You know, he almost signed to an Ivy League school, you know, so he's a part of that. But just coming in and just transforming the programs, having other kids that maybe haven't been playing football all their lives or not going to be major prospects, just to see how these guys work, how they operate, right, changes their mindset. Because we see that with Marshall. We had another running back by the name of Jamal Joseph. He's playing Division II ball. He had the same mindset. We see it with Bell. We see it with Alphonse now. I mean, these guys become natural leaders just because of their approach to the game, an approach that necessarily wasn't there before, you know, with kids that honestly most of them had started playing football ninth grade year. So, you know, we're getting kids now that this is what they do. They're football players. You know, they're academic kids. You know, Alphonse is a 4.0 kid. Darryl Bell's a 4.0 kid. You know, they're academic kids, but they are football players at heart. That's what they do. So, yeah, it just changes the dynamic entirely.
Coach, we thank you for being on. We're happy to see that the plan is progressing and succeeding so far. I hope you continued success. I mean, I remember Goleman when you guys were running the single wing, and it was just cloud of dust, everybody just gaining a few yards here and there, but you've evolved into the team that you are now. And little trivia, this is going to date me, but the very first game I ever covered for the Herald back in '99 was Goleman against Crop. And it was Crop's first ever game as a varsity team. And I remember Goleman won. There was a quarterback name. I think it was Robert Leva was the quarterback. Yeah. So it's good to see Goleman getting back in it, and we wish you guys the best. But more than anything, thank you, Coach, for being on the show and being our guest. So hopefully, it won't be the last time we can get you on at some point.
Hopefully,
later in the season.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. All right, take care.
Awesome. Bye. Thanks, Coach. Coach Ariel Cribero and Goleman. Let's see what happens. I mean, that's going to be. I have it being a really close game this week with American. But before we get to our picks, let's. We're back doing polls again, everybody. We're doing the Player of the Week polls. So they're up at MiamiHerald.com if you want to vote for your favorite players in football, volleyball, you name it, all the fall sports. This week we've got a few good candidates. Neiman Lawrence from Ransom Everglades football, 17 of 19, 315 yards through 6 touchdown passes in a win over Somerset Academy. And Jarvis Johnson, another player for Westminster Christian, had 123 yards and 4 TDs as the Warriors eked out a 32-26 win over Avant-Garde Academy. And then in other sports, Samira Persad at Reagan had a good start, led them to a 4-set win over Miami Beach. Cross-country season has begun. Henry Stark, an all-Dade kid last year, ran a pretty good time, 16:49, to win the Bobcat Invitational at St. Thomas University. And in swimming, Nicole Macedo at Mast wins the 100 butterfly and the backstroke to lead them to a win over Matter Lakes. And then in Broward, Jet Urgalitis, the quarterback for University School. University School has been pummeling people so far this season. 58-14 victory over Pinecrest. He threw 5 touchdowns and ran for another. We also have Ashley Fitzgerald, cross-country runner for American Heritage, has been dominant for over 3 years now on that in that sport. 18:54 ran a winning time at the Bobcat Invitational. In girls volleyball, Sarah Schnell led Pines Charter to a couple wins over Coral Springs and Spanish River. And on the golf scene, Audrey Basich for Archbishop McCarthy shot a 34 and won medalist honors to beat Cardinal Gibbons. So if you would like to, the polls are open at MiamiHerald.com. Vote for your favorite players in Dade and Broward. And that brings us to week 3, to the picks. And why don't we skip and just, since we're talking about American Goleman, let's just talk about that game. Mylander on Friday night, prime time, big game for both schools. Been a long time since those schools have had a big game. I think it's going to be close. I'm glad Coach isn't on the line anymore because I picked American, but I think it's going to be a close game.
These are two teams like that. I think we talked, I think, a little bit about American, and as we were going through our district by district previews, a lot of new pieces there. They're also off to a strong start to the year. I'm going to go with Goleman. I think that continuity helps them there, right? Like we said, this is a team that was in the GMAC Independent League Championship the last couple of years. And has kind of built, I think, with the same core group of guys. American maybe a little bit more talented, but a lot of new pieces still. Really good test, I think, for both of these teams.
Yeah, kind of similar, in the sense of one of these like heavy transfer teams. You kind of have to see how they gel. So yeah, big test coming up for American after this against Norland and other teams down the road. But you never know, this could be one of those springboard games for Goleman. I mean, their district. We talked about it a few episodes ago. Columbus is the monster in there.
Right.
But beyond that, if this team really is as good as they look like they are, potentially winnable games against Doral, Miami High, maybe could sneak into a playoff spot. So we'll see. And speaking of Norland, they go down to Southridge this week. They're coming off the big win over Lakeland and then absolutely destroyed an overmatched Carroll City team. Now they take on a pretty good team with Pierre Senadis at the helm that is trying to build up to that kind of caliber team. But I think this week, though, Norland is such a monster. I mean, we're talking about Norland being almost on the central level potentially. Yeah. I'm going with the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's tough to go down to Southridge and win. But they just went up to Lakeland and won, which is tough to do too. So, right. I got to go with Norland here. But I like this Southridge team a lot, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them as the year goes on too.
Yeah. Now this one, both in state, but a game between two teams not from the same county, not even from the same area, but a good one, two of the state powerhouses. Cocoa. I remember when Cocoa never left home. Now they travel. What is this? Now they come down. They're playing St. Thomas Aquinas this weekend, which took care of Fort Myers, bouncing back from the loss to Bosco. This one, I think, is going to be a very good game, though. Cocoa has some quality wins so far, and I think can push the Raiders. But I think this is where St. Thomas gets like their first big signature win of the season. Yeah,
I agree. This is, Bosco was a really tough situation for them. A new quarterback, a lot of new pieces, all over that roster, especially on offense. Then they go to Fort Myers, which is not the Fort Myers of old, winning in kind of like blowout fashion there. This is like the test, kind of like St. Thomas Aquinas should win this game. What I want to see is them like look really good on offense while doing it.
Yeah, let's see what they can cook up there. Ryan Schneider and the Cocoa Tigers, but yeah, I think too much with Aquinas there. If they limit mistakes, they should be fine. And another team taking on another. This one is an out-of-state opponent. This is a stop number 3 on that 5-game gauntlet that early in the season. That's Bergen Catholic. We mentioned before the latest test for Chaminade. This is a top 25 matchup again, as Bergen Catholic comes in with some pretty good weapons on offense and some talent on defense as well to test Chaminade. But I mean, what I saw the other day looked like the complete package. I mean, I know they had, like you mentioned, Kenyatta Jackson and other guys, but I really love what the defense is doing this year for the Lions. So
yeah, they're deep. That's the difference. That's the thing with Chaminade now, right? Is they've kind of hit that like St. Thomas, Central, Norland maybe has it this year. That level of depth, right? Where it's just all 11 guys you have on the field at any given time. Those guys are college players, Division I, Division II, whatever it is. I'm not picking against them.
Yeah, no, likewise. And staying in Broward, here's a good one. That's an all Broward matchup here. Coconut Creek, coming off a tough loss. They were trying to knock off a nationally ranked team in Gainesville, Georgia, but came up just a little short. I think it was a 1-point loss. Now takes on a very good Western team that we saw in week 1. They rested last week, had a bye week. Can Western's offense get going? I guess is the question. Was it just the weather in week 1? Or, when does this team get rolling? Creek is going to be a tough test. We saw them shut down Monarch, and Monarch has a pretty potent offense themselves. I think Western gets it done, but I think it's a very close game.
Yeah, I like Western here. I think Creek is probably a little underrated, under the radar right now. I think their defense is really good, as you mentioned. They shut down Monarch in a preseason game, but still, that's kind of a rivalry. Those guys were taking it seriously. But Western, I think we're still, like you said, we're waiting to see. But I trust the talent they have there, and the infrastructure, right? Like this is a game Western wins. For the last 5, 6, 7 years, like they've reached that point where they're the team kind of out in West Broward County that everyone's got them for.
Yeah, and then that takes us to the big one, and I think this is one of 3 games that we're eagerly waiting for this year in Class 2M. Maybe a few more than 3 games, but mainly these 3. I think Booker T, Central, Norland. When those 3 play each other, that's a must-see main event TV right there. And here's the first one. The old rivalry, Booker T and Central. Now, Central has dominated this rivalry in recent years. They have not lost to Booker T since 2014. I looked it up. And they've been playing every year, except the COVID year. They've played every single year. So I guess the big question is, has Booker T built up enough to challenge Central? I think they've at least built up enough to challenge Central, like I just said, but not beat Central. I think the Rockets bounced back from the Gorman loss. But this will be good. This will be a good game.
Yeah, I agree. I think challenge is the right word there. Central, like I said at the top, any questions you had about them, I think they answered a lot of them by the way they played out in Vegas. Now coming back home for their, biggest South, like you said, they know that Booker T and Norland think they can knock them off, and in all likelihood, Central's probably going to play those teams maybe each twice, maybe probably almost definitely 3 times as the season goes on. They're going to be ready for this game. I think Ice can give them a run. I think it was a relatively close competitive game last year, but I'm still going with Central kind of until proven otherwise in that district.
Yeah, and a little extra time to rest too for the Tornadoes because they were supposed to play Edison last week. Basically played 1 drive and the weather came and ruined that. So we'll see. We'll see. I think, Ice always has those games and always has his teams in big game mode and prepared. So it should be interesting. But we'll see. We'll be back next week and let you guys know how it happened. We'll recap it with highlights, some analysis, and we'll look ahead at that point to week 4. I mean, early in this season, there's no let up. Every week there's a big game. Seems to be nationally ranked teams facing each other. So plenty to talk about, especially in the early part of the season. For David Wilson, I'm Andre Fernandez. We'll see you guys next week.